Good afternoon and welcome to today's media availability session. We appreciate you taking the time today to join us. Our media session today will be addressing issues surrounding attempts to change behavior in high school sports to help with efforts to retain and recruit contest officials. The NFHS is pleased to offer this session today from its headquarters here in Indianapolis. The NFHS is the national leader and advocate for high school athletics and performing arts programs nationwide. We serve 51 state associations, 19,500 plus high schools, and more than 12 million student participants. Over the years, our chief task has been writing playing rules for 17 high school sports for boys and girls, but much more. We offer online education courses for high school coaches, officials, parents, students, and others, and ultimately to ensure that students have that opportunity to enjoy healthy participation, achievement, and good sportsmanship in education-based athletics. We are pleased to have our four panelists for our media session today: Dr. Karissa Niehoff, Chief Executive Officer of the NFHS; Dana Pappas, the Director of Officiating Services at the NFHS. We're also pleased to have Mano, President of the National Association of Sports Officials, NASO, as well as the founder of Referee Magazine, and Erin Trujillo, an active sports official from New Mexico, who also officiates in Colorado. This session may be recorded, and recording of this session will be available at the conclusion of our event on the NFHS YouTube channel, and certainly live streaming of Zoom windows is permitted. So during our session, we're going to have our four panelists share information about today's topic, and as they do that, if you will place any questions that you have in the Q&A, and they will respond to those questions after they complete their opening remarks today. Some questions that are put in there may be answered in written form if possible, but we will try to respond to as many as possible. The resources that we sent earlier in the media availability will be shared in the Zoom chat. But again, our topic today is changing behavior to retain and recruit officials in high school sports. We are pleased to have our team here. In addition to myself, Chris Boone, our Assistant Director, will be directing your questions to our panelists. Nate Perry, our Manager of Media Relations, will be answering questions in written form and running our slide here today. And Olivia Jennings, our Coordinator of Social Media and Communications, will be helping as well with some live tweeting. So to kick us off, we want to welcome first to speak today our Chief Executive Officer of the NFHS, Dr. Karissa Niehoff.
Well, thank you, Bruce, and welcome to everyone. Thank you especially to Erin, to Barry, and of course, Dana and the rest of our NFHS team. Before we get into the topic in particular, I also want to thank the media. For those of you that are on, we certainly came to appreciate you more than ever during the pandemic, when we were able to communicate what was going on in the high school ecosystem through you. We haven't been with you in a media availability since June, so this is actually good to be back and in front of you. Without question, this is a topic that is of serious concern, not just for the high school ecosystem, but for the collegiate, the professional, and even the youth sport ranks. Across the board, we are in an official shortage issue, that it's a critical mass issue. And we wanted to communicate with you and through you about the very issue. We also want to ask for your help. We really need you, the media, to take the information that we share with you today and get it out as appropriate through your channels, and do what you can to stay with us as we work through this issue, along with our great colleagues at NASO. Barry Mano and his team at NASO with the NFHS, we've been partners for a long time. I think more than ever, we're in lockstep about needing to do something around the officiating profession. Dana Pappas in our office she's a rock star, and she's doing a lot with other officiating groups, also serving as the board president for NASO. In short, what we found, a trend that was no surprise pre-pandemic, was that we were losing numbers of high school officials, and we were paying attention to that. Between the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic numbers, we realized we lost about 50,000 high school officials in sports, across sports. And despite our efforts for 5 years now to do a recruitment campaign, we still realize that loss. We have some numbers that are coming back slowly, but we really want to call attention to the loss itself and the crisis itself, but the reasons, more importantly, why. And what we've found, and through NASO's great work that Barry can talk about, the reasons why officials do not stay in the profession or leave the profession really center around behavior. When Dana Pappas hosted her first officials consortium last year, it was made loud and clear that we need to do something about behavior. So we committed as the NFHS to work together with NASO to do a specific campaign around behavior. And we're calling it the Bench Bad Behavior Campaign. It's designed to be edgy. It's designed to be clear and direct. Toolkit and resources are provided to states, PSAs, anything that a state may need, we are providing. Bruce Howard and his great team from the NFHS are communicating this through the video voice, the written voice, our social platforms. We're doing everything we can to get to the issue, which really is beyond just a sportsmanship concern. It's about behavior. It's about how we treat each other, how we respect each other, and certainly how we treat officials. So a lot to be shared with you today. We invite your questions. We hope for your partnership and absolutely want to be working with you, the media, as our channel, our distribution channel, and our voice in getting this message out to people. So thank you for joining us today. We at the NFHS are here to serve. Really appreciate your partnership as a media entity. So Bruce, back to you.
Thank you, Karissa. This time I'll turn it over to Dana Pappas, the Director of Officiating here with the NFHS, to tell you some of the other things that she has coming up. Dana?
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Karissa. A lot of what Karissa said is really a great segue to the topics that I have on my list of things to cover today. So as she mentioned, we did have our Consortium 1.0, which the idea behind that when we launched it in April of last year was collaboration. So when I started working at the National Federation last fall, I was being contacted from every direction, every sport, every level, about the need to really recruit, retain, protect, train, and educate officials across the board. And what I found very quickly to be the case was that there were 70 different organizations trying to combat the same problem, but from 70 different directions. So we really wanted to make sure that we were at the center of trying to reach some collaboration with all of those entities. So we had our first consortium, and we had about 60 individuals in attendance representing about 50 organizations. And it was really geared toward the individuals that work within the officiating world. We brought them in, and for a couple of days, we talked about the problems. And we all know that it's very easy to talk about problems without ever talking about solutions. So we dedicated time to really develop some potential solutions for different organizations to use, because we understand within the NFHS family that we've got to go bigger and broader than just our state associations, because there's so much overlap with officials. There's so much overlap with those student athletes and coaches that it's important that there's buy-in from other entities other than just the National Federation and our member state associations. So as we had the consortium, we followed up with 8 sectional summits that were done online so that anybody not at the consortium could still hear what was discussed and provide us with their opinions and feedback. After that, we had about 25 to 30 one-on-one sessions where we met with entities who had attended to really talk about how to partner with them and how to further the message of bench bad behavior, which was really born out of the consortium. So from all of those meetings, we were able to put together a recruitment and retention strategies document, which I believe the link has been provided for you all for that. And that was divided into a number of sections: assigners and assignments, behavior and sportsmanship, financial issues within officiating, mentorship, observation, evaluation, recruitment and outreach, respect and empathy, support, and training and education. So we really wanted to make sure that we were touching every topic that has to do with the loss of officials. Many of them overlapped as far as the tie-in back to behavior, but we certainly wanted to make sure that we didn't leave any stones unturned in the discussion, which was why we felt such a need for collaboration. So now we're in January of 2023. We're going to have our next consortium next week, January 26th through the 28th. We have about 77 individuals who are registered for that, representing 61 sport entities. And now what we're doing is taking those recruitment and retention strategies and meeting with state association leaders, with NGB leaders, to really talk about how to implement some of the ideas that came out of the first consortium. So we identified the problems, we came up with a plan, and now how do we get that plan moving forward within the state associations, within national governing bodies, and even within the collegiate and professional setting. So the focus of all of this has been collaboration. We are seeing a little bit of an upward trend in the officials numbers, but that doesn't mean that our efforts stop. That just means we have to work harder, we have to accelerate more, keep our foot on the gas. For fall sports, which really are football and volleyball as a large portion of that. Soccer is a split season in many states. So our numbers this year, we saw about 4% growth in football and 5% growth in volleyball from last year to this year. So there's a little bit of a bounce back we hope that we're seeing. We don't know if those are new officials or if those are officials who maybe sat out during the pandemic and came back. I know Barry will be discussing their upcoming survey, which is going to go a lot more in depth than just registration numbers. So I won't steal his thunder, but we certainly will be looking to that survey for some information. So spirit of collaboration moving forward, and we'll definitely keep everybody posted as far as what comes out of the consortium next week. And that's all I've got, Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana. We're very pleased to have Barry Mano with us today. Barry started Referee Magazine in 1975, I believe. So he's certainly a foremost authority on officiating in this country. So Barry, we're very pleased to have you with us today.
Thank you, Bruce. It at least makes me one of the older authorities, living authorities on the topic of sports officials. Yeah, the magazine started, first issue of January 1976, for the express purpose of giving sports officials a voice, because nothing was really being written by us for us. And then 3.5 years later, we started the National Association of Sports Officials. And today we have roughly 30,000 dues paying members. So the numbers of officials that are around are important to us on a whole bunch of levels. I mean, it's really important. And I'm really pleased and proud to be part of this effort that's going on today involving the media. On our end, think about it. We have a National Association of Sports Officials, but we're also in the media. We're both of those. So we have those sensitivities. Now, there's been conversation because before the pandemic, it's important for everybody to understand the numbers were on the downside of the hill before the pandemic.
Yep.
The pandemic put an exclamation mark on that slide, that skid that we haven't really recovered from. And because that was going on pre-pandemic, NESO started a program called Say Yes to Officiating. And it's simple in concept, which is we wanted to gather up, we create a lot of resources, but a lot of other organizations, they create great resources, including NFHS and many others. And we wanted to bring those together in one place as a resource base for people that wanted to recruit and retain officials. And that developed into the Say Yes to Officiating website. All those resources there, and I commend those to the media on top of it, because you're going to find more about what we're doing in officiating. Those are all free resources, so you can go there and you can get them. Another thing, and the timing is terrific, this summer in Riverside, California, NESO is holding its annual summit conference for 2023, and the theme couldn't be any better, which is good sports, bad sports, better sports through officiating. So we are focusing on this And that was the theme we were going to use before the pandemic crashed us. And we had to just go and do online, do it virtually. So we've resuscitated that, and that's going to be part of the theme. So that's very important. Another thing that I think the media is aware of, and they should be aware of, are all the legislative efforts that we're involved in, and not just NESO. Yes, we've done a lot over the years. We've been successful in 23 different states to get legislation passed to increase the penalties when you have bad behavior towards officials. That's one way to approach it. Another way to approach this whole behavior issue has to do with educational resources. We were talking about it at a NETIC breakfast this morning here in Racine, about how the training of officials needs to change a bit. We're not refereeing in the same world that most of us are familiar with. It's different today. And so that causes me to sort of look inward on us. Now, one thing that NESO does, it has this member information and consultation program, which is part of this inward looking. When officials, not only are members, by the way, because when somebody calls us, we have a hard time saying no, member or not. And we can give them advice on how to go forward regarding certain things, whether they're risk or legal or other matters. Also, we were thinking about this morning. The training of sports officials, I think, needs to get better. We need to get better on how to diffuse situations. We didn't have so many situations in the old days when I was much younger to have to diffuse, and we have to do that today. Another thing is our responsibilities today. In this world where the standards for language, the standards for sensitivities, the standards for permissiveness has changed the environment in which men and women who officiate go out there and do their jobs. I think we as leaders in education and administration need to rethink how we're approaching taking care of sports officials. And then just two more quick things. One, I call them administrative interventions. Administrators are in charge. The referees aren't in charge. We're in charge of the game. We're not in charge of the environment. So when a crew of sports officials comes to a site, they need to be better taken care of. They need to be recognized. They need to be, make sure it's secure. Do some things that make them feel welcome, that make them feel respected. Because, hey, folks, it's not always about money. I mean, we can solve the problem we're talking about today if we started paying $500 a game for high school. We're not going to do that. The shortage is not going to go away. So we have to do these other things. And that leads me to the last point, which has to do, I think, a stronger investment in sports officiating, certainly at the high school and the youth levels where it's really needed more than ever. So that's about what I have as an introduction, Bruce.
Thanks, Barry. Great comments and great points. Thank you very much. We're also pleased here today to have Erin Trujillo with us, someone who's actively officiating today and can give us a little lay of the land in terms of what she goes through as an official and can maybe talk about some of those issues that we're dealing with around the country. Erin, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite today and hope that I can at least shine some light from the inside of the officiating world on what we're dealing with and how that's kind of changed over the course of my career, although not as long as Barry's. I've been around for a little while, so I can definitely let you know how things have progressed through the years and look forward to hopefully finding a solution that's going to help everybody.
Thanks, Erin. Once again, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we'd be happy to answer those. I think if we want to start out with some questions here, just some general questions on the topic of officiating. This could be for anybody. Many of the behavior issues occur with youth sports. How do you work with youth sports programs to try to correct the issue at that level?
Yeah.
Karissa, if you'd like to start.
Sure. I appreciate that. And that's absolutely where it starts. As everyone on this call probably knows, the youth sports environment is one where it may be somebody raises their hand and I'll volunteer to coach, or maybe I'll volunteer to officiate a game. It's also the ground where we see some of our teenagers that might be interested, some of our adolescents that are older, that go out there to do a youth game or a youth event, and they get beat up a little bit. They get criticized. They often refer to the youth environment as the Wild West because there are no real program standards and probably no sort of supervisor administrator on site. So without any kind of parameters around behavior at youth events, parents, for whatever reason, develop into the parents that they become. Volunteer coaches without an educational background coach the way they will. And younger people or volunteer officials are treated the way they are. And without corrections in place, there can be a lot of turnoff in that environment. So I think we have to do a better job of reaching out to organizations that organize youth sports, whether it be Parks and Recreation, whether it be youth soccer, for example, U.S. youth soccer, AAU basketball, what have you, just to try to create the relationships around education and some of the environmental expectations that Barry referred to about taking care of that experience for officials.
And I think, Karissa, that goes back to the collaboration issue. So as you're naming some of those entities, they will be at the consortium, and there are some of the national governing bodies and youth sport entities who have already asked to co-brand our Bench Bad Behavior campaign. So a lot of the discussion about that campaign in particular was really finding ways that we can start to change that culture at the youth level, using a common language, using a common dialogue. So that way, when a parent is at their kid's 5-year-old baseball game, they'll be hearing the same message from the time the child is 5 until the time the child graduates from high school. That's our hope. So as we're collaborating with these entities, we're providing them every tool that we come up with from the NFHS perspective, and making them aware of some of the other resources with NASO, with some of the other governing bodies who work more in depth with officials. So we're really trying to make sure that we provide those tools so that they hear the same message for the entire 13, 14 years that their kid is playing youth and high school sports.
Very good. Thank you both.
I absolutely agree with what was just said. The worst case scenarios that we get here at NESO almost always come out of the youth and rec level. They're not from the high school level. And that's because, as Karissa said, it's more like the Wild West. It's really important, I think, for administrators, the people that own the game, in quotes, come to the realization that they're going to have to put some lines in the sand, that certain types of behaviors are just not going to be tolerated. And that's going to have a bad effect on not only those parents, but in some cases, when it gets egregious, that it's going to have an effect on the child that's playing. You hate to make that link, but the things that have been tried don't seem to really be working as good as they should be working. And so the parents really need to, get a life. And I'm getting more sensitive to this, by the way, because I have 2 granddaughters, 11 and 8, and they're both in sports. And their father, my son-in-law, great guy, he's a lawyer in Chicago, he's really into youth sports. So I'm getting more and more when I talk to him and I'm around him of what that environment is like. And now with traveling teams. So, you go out of your community, it might be that the community standards that you adhere to in your community aren't the ones you're going to. You might feel more uninhibited, right? These are all the things that start to play out. Let me add one other thing from the officiating standpoint, because we talked about this morning. We ourselves in officiating have to get better as we approach these games, whether they're high school or youth or whatever. We're living in a different age. Back in the day, we went out and whatever we called, that was it. And that was the end of the story. Today, it's not quite that way. People are looking for second opinions. They like replay at the upper levels. And then you have this whole issue of the use of language. You heard me reference this before. sort of the permissiveness that we find ourselves in. I'm not castigating anybody. All I'm saying is the environment in which we work as officials has changed. And so we have to be better at understanding that environment. And sometimes maybe we overdo it as officials. We need to be a little more understanding of these things. Somebody might, utter a profane word. We don't like it. In the context of the world in which we live, does that mean a summary ejection? We got to work through those things in officiating. It's not quite the way it was back then. So we have a responsibility here, is my main point, as those that are on the mission to help officials do better. We got to do better ourselves in helping them do better.
And if I may follow up, a thought that I have in response to Barry's comments as well. If we look at the institution of sport, and Barry, to your point about how it used to be versus where we are now, the institution of sport, and I will say this over and over, has gone from, especially at the scholastic level, being a formative institution to performative. And this is where we need your help as the media. And we know you have a job to do, to highlight the performance of sport and the performance aspects of sport teams and athletes and the excitement around performance. But for us, sports are still formative. And I think if we can bring that focus back, especially for youth sports and scholastic sports, this is about growth and development. This is not about performance development. I think that would be a help too.
Very good. Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple of questions in the Q&A here, probably for Karissa and maybe Barry. This is referencing a new rule out of California that mentions that if a fan assaults officials, they'll be banned from attending future high school events in that state. Do we see this as the norm going forward in other states? Have you seen anything to that nature, Karissa?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are starting to see that. New Mexico is another state that has taken a pretty strong approach, and maybe Erin can comment on that. But we are starting to see more stringent sanctions for people that behave badly. I'll pause there. Erin or Dana, do you want to speak about New Mexico or other things?
Dana might be able to speak more specifically to the legislation portion. I am not super familiar with it, but I can tell you that in more recent years, there is more of a presence of a school security guard being at a game or local police officers being at a game. And I think that's inherently the backside of people feeling like there is more potential for face-to-face harassment from a fan, whether that be after the game or seeking you out in a hallway or even the secure place where you're supposed to be able to dress, those kind of things, as well as just face-to-face on the court. I mean, we've seen videos across the nation of people being attacked in broad daylight on the court by folks who don't think that the game was properly called or didn't feel like a call went their way or whatever that was. So I think that's probably the nature of the beast, is going to continue to be more of that nationwide as more aggressive behavior is shown in each game.
And kind of continuing in that question. Hey, Dana, did you have something to add? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I know that there are many states who have contacted me about is it okay for us to have a bylaw about banning a spectator for 365 days? And really that's up to the state association. So I do think that there will be more of that, just because I know it's become such a hot button issue for state associations.
Our next question kind of touches on that and kind of direct this towards Erin, I think, and maybe Barry. But just what are the most common examples of bad behaviors that officials experience in your experience?
Go ahead, Erin.
Well, I can tell you, a conversation that I have had recently is that people feel like that their $5 entry fee allows them to come into the facility and say or behave however they would like. That's cussing, that's leaning over, pointing fingers in the face of the officials. if it's I know we work in very small environments here, a lot of times rural environments, and the facility is not large as far as space around the floor. So there's a lot of spectators and people very close by. So, they will say things, whether it be under their breath or big and verbose with their hands in the air to you about everything from your mother to your heritage to your skin color, all of those things seem to be felt to be a free-for-all for their $5 fee to get into the game. Whereas in our perspective, we're trying to call that equally on both sides, the best you can do what you see happens in front of you, and, have been grilled to leave out everything else. So I think that continues to develop into more of a fear of physically being harmed, whether that be during or after the game for officials. And, that comes both from coaches, fans, even kids themselves.
I've often been quoted that sports is simply life with the volume turned up. So in some measure, why are we surprised? We're living in a louder world, more exhibitionism going on, the whole support by social media, all that is going on. It plays out in the sports. Other thing that's important for us to keep in mind, back in the old days, I hate to keep referring to those, but the thought of a physical assault against an official was way out there on the moon somewhere. Today, we are getting reports every single week in this office having to do with physical assaults against sports officials. I hate to even sit here on this program and say that. I mean, when I started the association, who would have thought? Here we are 4 decades later, and we're talking about this and spending all this time. So we need to come a grip. We got to get a grip on this as a society, as a culture. I like to have us move towards how we conduct ourselves towards judges. I mean, if we were in a courtroom, right, and somebody jumped across and slugged the judge, we would be outraged as a culture. We would say, wait a minute, we're not going down this road. I think we have to have more of that vibe when it comes to sports. I'm not saying equate us with judges, but get us into the same courtroom with them. And I think that's going to help this matter.
Very good. And I have another question here that kind of alludes to that, and specifically the influence of social media on officials leaving that profession. What are you seeing on a national scale of that scrutiny causing officials to leave the profession?
Well, I'll just very quickly take the lead on this. What you have is social media identifying officials by name and beating the crap out of them. And so that's a big reason why people say, why am I going to keep doing this? Why am I going to go out there and take my time for a few bucks, and then I'm getting trashed in my own community and neighborhood and nationwide by name because they think I did something wrong? People don't want to do this. They don't want to put up with it. So I don't know how we get that in hand, because I'm not sure we're exercising the restraint necessary as a culture yet.
And I think the byproduct of that, it's a huge issue for retention, but it's a recruitment issue. If you're considering it and all you're seeing is officials getting blasted on social media, why would you go into it? It's such a complex issue. The other thing that we see a lot of is when officials at any level, when they're getting their calls consistently questioned and they're being criticized, everybody thinks they're an expert. So just because a TV commentator disagreed with a rule and now they've put it on Twitter, people think that that's the rules expert, but they may not be. So it really, social media is great for a lot, but it also instills a false sense of courage. It's that keyboard warrior mentality that really causes some issues with the ability to recruit and retain officials.
And really oftentimes on social media, you get a 2-second snapshot of what happened. Yeah. You do not get the full story of what happened through that game. That official may have taken a beating up to that point, and then a bad call was made or a missed call was made. That's the part that gets shown, not what led to that situation.
I probably get interviewed, I don't know, 50 or 60 times a year by the media. And at some point during those interviews, I always make this point, this discussion cannot turn on the rightness or the wrongness of the call. That's not what this is about. Because let's face it, the numbers are clear. Between 80 and 92% of the time, we're correct. Now we can talk about, the 8% or the 12%, but that can't be the discussion for the levels we're talking about. You can have that discussion for the game last night in Tampa with the NFL, major college, you can do that. But these other levels, what we're talking about with the media, it can't turn on the rightness or the wrongness of the call. I mean, that's the wrong approach to this subject.
Very good, thank you. Maybe this question for Dr. Niehoff, but basically, what has been some of the impact on high school sports that this officiating shortage has caused that you've seen?
Oh, my goodness. It's been huge. And we saw this coming, as we've alluded to before, but we're starting to see state associations and schools that actually have to reschedule games, and just so that they can perhaps get a complete officiating crew. So let's take the sport of football, which has always been highlighted for a Friday night, varsity night, lights, all of that. We're starting to see states that move football to Thursdays. We're starting to see where games are actually canceled, varsity level across sports, games, track meets, you name it, they're getting canceled because they can't find people to work the games. So you've got private schools competing with public schools. You have a lot of our high school officials that might do D3 as well in their areas. So there's this demand for the human capacity, and we just don't have enough people to work the complete crews. So we're seeing programs disappear. We're seeing games disappear, rescheduled when possible, or they're playing short, where you want to have a three folks on the floor for basketball. We're seeing 2 if we can. All sorts of shortage issues, and it is leading to games being canceled.
Thank you. Had another question come in here talking about the role in which schools should be working with coaches to promote better behavior on the sidelines that could then affect parents and fans. How should schools take that approach towards their coaches?
I think that that's one of the most critical elements to solving this problem, is getting the involvement of coaches, because the coaches are so, I don't want to say powerful, that's probably not the right word, but they have so much influence over their kids, over their community. How they act is how their community is going to act, how their program is going to act. So if you see a coach who's highly demonstrative and possibly very confrontational, that's how the fans are going to act. They feed off of everything that head coach does. And, we see a lot of issues, especially at the sub-varsity level, where you have a newer coach with a newer official. They're both trying to learn. They don't know yet how to communicate with one another and manage the game and coach their kids and do all of that. So we run into issues at that level in particular, but really it is critical to pair and partner with coaches in this endeavor, because if we don't address it with them, it'll never be fixed. I just feel like it might be a missing part of what we're trying to do. And I know we're trying to stress that a little bit more, but it's something where the effort needs to really be focused with coaches and talk about the effect that their behavior has, not just on their kids, but everybody in attendance at that game.
And Dana, if I may add to that, I think school administrators, we have schools now, many of them have school resource officers or, some sort of civic officials, police or whatever at games. We've got to work with everybody. School administrators, if you are in attendance at that game, you've got to work that game. If you are a school resource officer or a police officer hired to supervise the event, be in the gym, be on the field, work the event. And I think if fans see that the school message from the administration on down, the community message from the police and support, and certainly from the coach, as Dana said, it's got to be a collective approach. Too often we have seen folks leaning against the wall of the gym, watching things happen, stuff's going on in the stands, And athletic directors, they need support. The officials are not, as Barry said, they're not responsible for fixing the stands or fixing the crowd. They are responsible for the event. And if the crowd is misbehaving and the official is distracted, they can't watch the event. So we've got to have the school administrators, the support of ADs, coaches, obviously, and police on site to work together.
I can attest to the difference it makes to be able to take a security person with you to the stands to deal with an issue versus a singular administrator by themselves, especially in a really large facility. There's just something about that person, their uniform, the fact that they are set up to do that, that makes a gigantic amount of difference versus a gym master who has just been assigned to that particular day because the athletic director is at has to be at multiple sporting events and can't be there every minute. Being asked to go and remove someone from the building or go address someone who's not behaving appropriately, how much of a difference that makes. And on the backside of that, we have to think of them the same physical safety issues as we do our officials, because they're facing those same items when they go into a stance where there may be a group of 20 people that are causing an uproar versus, one in a very small school. They may not feel comfortable in going themselves. So strength in numbers, I guess, is where I'm going with that, to be able to band together to take care of those issues.
Yeah. And I was a former high school principal. So one of the things that we did in our school was we mobilized the kids. We had a student group that they were athletic leaders. They were fan leaders, and we mobilized them. So they had places in the stands and they set the tone. We had other faculty members, parents that signed up to be a part of the fan lead group. And they went out there and they were present. And that made a huge difference too. When kids see their peers who are respected leading the way, they follow. And kids are pretty good to respond. When adults see another adult leading the way and getting the positive lift for the role that they're playing, that's huge. So take advantage of the folks who are there and their positive energy, and try to create sort of a contagion of good behavior. You can do it with the right people.
Very good, thank you. This next question talks about kind of the recruitment and retention of officials that we've seen so far. Are we seeing younger adults signing up to be officials? And I know we talked about the aging population of officials. What can we do to make sure that those officials are up to the task of officiating, I guess? Is that something that we should worry about? Or what's the population of officials right now, and how do we maintain a good working group, I guess?
Well, we are a very graying industry, and the numbers show that. And we're getting ready, as was mentioned early on, where NESO is going to be going out with another huge national survey here in the next couple months to put some additional validation to what we did in 2017. But we're not attracting and hanging on to younger people. I mean, the average age of people coming into officiating is something like 40 today. I mean, it used to be 19 and 20. So we're not bringing that younger group in. And when you had logically asked the question, well, why? Well, you look around and say, do you want to go into that environment as a young person? That's why, and this is held true for all the decades. If you bring 100 new people into officiating in year one, at the end of year 3, 70 of them have left. There's only 30 there. So just imagine the churn involved in trying to fill that bucket with fresh, warm bodies and then come out the other end and hang on. And that happens because they come in and they get shell-shocked. They get shell-shocked because of behavior, but they also get shell-shocked because we in our own industry, officiating, are not taking good care of them the way we need to. We need to help them along better than we are. That's on us. But the rest of the world needs to help on its end regarding the behavior at these people who are new officials.
And the good news is I I agree. We definitely are a graying population, but there are a number of states who are very aggressively approaching this issue and offering junior officials programs. I know I think I saw Pennsylvania's on with us in the chat. Kansas, there's probably over 20 states that are doing something with regard to instructing officiating in high schools across the country. And more states are actually getting approval from their departments of education to allow this to be a PE credit or something within that curriculum so that students are getting credit for it. Our hope is, as these students are coming in and they're receiving training and mentoring, which we know is absolutely imperative for officials to have mentorship, we're hoping that they don't face one of those bad fan experiences, because then they will be in that 70 group that have left in 3 years. So we're really hopeful that with these new officiating curricula, with classes being offered within high schools and so much of that outreach to current students and former student athletes, that we're able to kind of replenish that pool. There's a lot of officials who continue to work just because they know that there's no one there to replace them. So while they may get criticized a little bit because maybe they're not as quick as they used to be, they're holding on to be able to provide a service for student athletes so that kids get to participate. And I guess, I've talked with Karissa about this, and probably with Barry at some point. The frustration really becomes, during the pandemic, what we heard from everybody was we just want our kids to play. So we thought that at the end of the pandemic, we would see some behavioral adjustment taking place. And in many cases, it's gotten worse. So what I've told a number of groups is that behavior that we're seeing in the stands, that's the next pandemic. The bad thing is that pandemic can actually be controlled. We couldn't control COVID. This is what comes out of our mouths, how we act, how we comport ourselves during athletic contests. If we can control that a little bit better, a lot of this other stuff is going to really resolve itself. So I just hope that as these young kids are coming in and trying to start officiating, that they're given a little bit of grace, because they need it, because they'll leave. They'll find something else to do with their spare time if they don't get that grace.
Well, as Barry said earlier, where they hear the biggest complaints being from the newer incoming Parks and Rec, AAU, Yaffle football, whatever, and young kids soccer, that's generally where a new official starts. You don't just get to go be the superstar NBA official, the Division I, #1 men's official, those kind of things. You have to start somewhere. And that's where they put them to start, is with the younger kids. That's where the odd situations happen. That's where you learn more about the rules and what can happen. That's where you get to make a mistake and not hopefully be just completely bashed for that, or make it a altering decision that you're not going to send a team to the state tournament or whatnot. It's a lot less drastic at that level, I guess is what I'm saying. But unfortunately, in starting them there, you also are running into the worst behavior, the parents that feel like that kid's going to be in the NBA, and if their team didn't win that game that day, they're not going to get a scholarship to go to college, those kind of things. So as Dana said, you have to give grace to those new officials coming in, because they have to have a learning situation outside of a classroom, or outside of watching video, or outside of learning the rules on paper. They have to be able to physically put those in play, and they are going to make mistakes, and you can't chase them off before they're able to learn and grow from those mistakes and become that good official that you want to see down the road.
Very good. Thank you. Just a couple more questions here. I think maybe direct this one towards Erin. In your mind, how can schools advocate and support officials when they come to their building?
Well, I think one of the really most important things is have somebody there who you can rely on. That's an administrator, that's a security person, that whoever that may be, or multiple people. Make sure when they walk in the door that they have that point of contact. They know where they're supposed to be. Get them a facility that's secure, that they can dress away from the crowd, not feel like somebody's going to be knocking on the door to come in. And I can tell you from experience, the janitor coming in to clean that room because they think nobody's in there, kind of thing. You need to have those areas secure. you know, most officials in my experience, and I can only speak from my experience, but they're not in it for the money. Yes, the money matters, but that's not why they're doing it. They love the kids. They love the camaraderie of the officiating environment and their fellow officials and being able to participate in that. They love having the ability to move up in those ranks, you know, that ability to achieve something as well as watching the kids achieve that. And whether they're participating in it to support their own children as well, you know, they may be trying to make environments better for their own, but the thing that really will drive an official away is not necessarily whether they got a candy bar at that game, but whether they left and felt like they had been appreciated for the time and effort they spent away from their own family, giving to someone else's kids. In most situations, you're providing that service not for your own children and not for your own grandkids or your nieces and nephews, but for someone else's kids so they can play the game. And there's a gentleman that has been an official for several years that I'm acquainted with, and he loves to say, at the end of the day, a game without officials is just practice. And that's what you're going to get to if you eventually chase all the officials away, is you're just going to get to have practice. That's what you get.
Thank you. Another question came in here, and Erin, you mentioned that, you know, officials may not do it for the pay, but does pay impact the retention of officials? And should there be more standards for pay and other expenses such as travel and equipment? So I don't, who would like to handle it?
I don't know, you know, if it should be standardized, I doubt it. But if the question is, if officials got paid more money, would officials hang around more? And the answer is yes, the market works. We're all subject to the market forces. And I sort of jokingly said before, we can help with the shortages, just start paying $500 a game for high school games. And guess what? You're not going to have a shortage for long, but that's not realistic. And I think Erin said it perfectly. We're not doing this for the dole. It's important because that's a sign of respect, but it's those other things that are important. So yes, if there were more money, that means there would be incrementally more officials. Of course, it's not going to drive them away, and having their time covered, their expenses covered. But we still have to be real how we approach this. There's only so much there to deal with. And so we have to come up with these other ways to develop respect. As Erin mentioned, that's so important to get this done. I mean, quickly, we just up the road from my office here, they built this new, very nice stadium for high school football. And they have an officials dressing room, and you go in and it's just a block room. It's very small. There's nothing in there. It might be a bench. And then in the wall, there's a big opening that leads right to the team dressing room right there on the other side of the wall. They put that in there, the architect did, so they could have airflow. Well, are we joking? You're going to have us in there. We can hear everything that's being said by the team and the coaches. I mean, is anybody thinking about us and the environment that we have to be in? Please. That's just a small thing that needs to be addressed by administrators and people that are in charge of the games.
And I don't think that officials necessarily get in it for the pay, but I do think it becomes a retention issue for sure. If somebody has officiated for 10 years and they've never even seen a dollar increase, that's just, I mean, it's insulting. It really is. You're providing a service. So one of the things we've really talked with our state associations about is needing to make sure that when you're working on budgets, that you are factoring in officiating as a cost of doing business. And it gets overlooked quite a bit. We're looking at the expenses for everything else. We're going, gas is more expensive, uniforms are more expensive, meals for the kids are more expensive, and you're figuring all of this out, but you kind of forget about those officials and the fact that they haven't seen a pay raise. You know, some states will tie officials' pay raises in with educator pay raises. Some don't do that. Some have a 3-year process where they're reviewing it every 3 years. Some states aren't reviewing it at all. And that's where the problem rests. I think that for the younger generation of officials, we might undersell the pay a little bit, to be quite honest with you, because when it comes to looking at, am I going to go work at a fast food restaurant or am I going to go work as an official? You'll make more as an official and probably not have to deal with some of the things that you don't want to deal with in other industries. But obviously there's going to be drawbacks with officiating as well. But I think that the money as a motivator, that's probably not it. But I think as officials are in for a while, and from my experience at a state association and now at the Federation, the issue does become the price of everything has gone up. Uniforms are more expensive. Gas for my car is more expensive. And I haven't seen an increase in 10 years. That's the problem. It's not the pay to begin with. It's the pay to continue.
And I would say, Dana, like you think about some of our geographically more challenged states, you want to officiate a high school game and you're going to take out, let's say, 4 to 6 hours of your day, cutting your own profession short if you have another job. And let's say you get paid $80. So now what are you making? $15 to $20 an hour? You know, and then there's the gas, and then there's the beratement, and then, you know, it's just financially, it's just to Barry's point, if we could throw $500 out for a game, we might get more, and we might get them trained, and they deserve it. They deserve it. But it's not realistic. So there are a few things here that we need to pay attention to.
I would concur. And, you know, you will get that. I don't know what was on the survey, obviously that ranked second, third, whatever for retention, but I will guarantee somewhere on that list will be, well, it cost me more money to get to the game than I got in a game fee. I had to put tires on my car every season. I have to buy a new uniform because they changed the setup of the uniform every year. You know, a state association decided they wanted to adopt a new color and everybody needed a new color. So now I have to have a different color of uniform. And you know, gas is now $5 a gallon instead of $2.50 a gallon. So the same amount, and places that I went last year are costing me 3 times as much as they did the year before. And that's not coming down. And, you know, at the end of the day, like I said, people are probably not saying I'm in it for the money, but if you can't get out of the facility having made anything for your 2.5 hours worth of work, McDonald's looks like a little better deal down the road at the pay that you're getting there.
Thank you all very much. I think we've answered all the questions in the Q&A. Some great responses. Appreciate everyone's participation. Karissa, did you have anything that you wanted to say before we close here?
Thanks, Bruce. You know, honestly, it really is just thank you to the media that have been with us today. And of course, Barry and Erin and Dana and our team. But media, we need your help. We need your help. Everything that we shared with you is a snapshot of the deeper issues. And as we go through the NASO and their next survey, we need your help to get the message out there that this is a great profession. It's a necessary profession. And it is, we're at a critical mass issue. By the way, we're also at a critical mass issue for coaches. So we need to address the institution of sport and how behavior is normalized in sport. The first place we see a problem is with our officials. So we need your help as a profession in the media to get the good messages out there about the challenges and the value of officiating, but also the bad behavior. So please help us out, stay in touch with us. We're working hard together for people like Erin in the field. Please, anything that we do that you feel is appropriate to promote, we ask that you do that.
Thanks, Karissa, and thank you all for participating in our media availability today. You see our contacts. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Again, this recording will be available as we conclude here on our YouTube channel on NFHS. So feel free to get the recording there. And thank you again, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.